It was a rainy Tuesday morning when I first noticed him. The kind of day when the skies were heavy with gray clouds and the air smelled fresh, yet there was an unmistakable sense of anticipation in the office. His name was Daniel Carter, the managing director of our company, and while I had seen him in meetings before, it wasn't until that day that something about him truly stood out. His presence was commanding, yet quiet. There was a calmness in the way he walked into the office that morning, his black leather shoes clicking softly on the polished floor. He wasn't loud, but every person in the room seemed to take notice of him. I couldn't help but watch him as he greeted the team, his deep voice carrying an air of authority. But beneath that professional exterior, I noticed something else. There was a kindness in his eyes, something that made me curious. I had been working at the company for about 6 months, and although I had encountered Daniel in meetings, I had never really interacted with him beyond the occasional nod or polite exchange. But today, something was different. As I sat at my desk, trying to focus on my work, I couldn't help but glance over at him, every now and then. His focused expression as he spoke with clients over the phone, the way he carried himself with ease in every situation, it all fascinated me. Days passed, and I tried to shake the thoughts of Daniel from my mind. It wasn't that I had never been attracted to someone before. I had. But there was something about him that felt different. It wasn't just his looks. It was his intelligence, his poise, and his ability to make anyone in the room feel like they mattered. He had a way of listening that made you feel heard, even when the world was chaotic around you. At work, I kept my feelings in check. I wasn't one to mix personal emotions with professional life. But every time Daniel passed my desk, or when we exchanged brief pleasantries in meetings, I felt a flutter in my chest. It was subtle at first, a brief moment of warmth in an otherwise ordinary conversation. But as time went on, I found myself looking forward to those fleeting moments. One afternoon, my manager asked me to work on a special project alongside Daniel. It was an opportunity one couldn't pass up, a chance to work directly with him. As the project unfolded, I found myself spending more and more time with Daniel. We would sit in the conference room, discussing strategies, brainstorming ideas, and working through the details of our project. He was smart, creative, and more than anything, he made me feel like my ideas mattered. At first, I tried to maintain my professionalism, keeping my emotions at bay. But the more time we spent together, the more I found myself drawn to him. His laughter, his thoughtful gestures, the way his eyes would light up when he talked about something he was passionate about, it was all so captivating. Then, one day, as we were wrapping up a meeting, Daniel turned to me with a smile. "You know, I've been meaning to ask you," he said, his voice soft but direct. "What made you choose this career path?" I hesitated for a moment, caught off guard by the question. "I guess I've always loved problem solving," I replied, offering a small smile. "And I like the idea of making a difference, even in small ways." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "I can see that," he said. "You're very good at what you do." His words, simple yet sincere, made my heart race. He had complimented my work before, but this felt different. It was as if he saw me not just as a colleague, but as someone he respected. We continued to work together, and as the days turned into weeks, I found myself growing more comfortable around him. There were moments when our hands brushed as we passed papers, moments when our gazes lingered just a bit longer than they should have. But every time I caught myself feeling something more, I quickly pushed it aside. After all, Daniel was my boss. There was no way I could act on these feelings. I told myself to focus on my work and nothing else. But despite my best efforts, the attraction continued to grow. One evening, after a particularly long meeting, Daniel suggested we grab dinner to unwind. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if it would be too personal. But then he smiled and said, "It's just dinner. No pressure." We ended up at a quiet little restaurant nearby. Over pasta and wine, we talked about everything and nothing. He shared stories from his past, his early career, the challenges he had faced, and how he had worked his way up to where he was now. He listened intently as I shared my own experiences, and I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone else. There was a level of comfort between us, an ease that made the world outside the restaurant seem far away. As the night wore on, I realized that I had been completely caught up in the moment. It wasn't just the conversation, it was the way he made me feel. Special. Important. Like I mattered. But with that realization came a deep sense of confusion. I was falling for my boss. And that was dangerous territory. The moment of truth. The days after our dinner together were a whirlwind. The project we had been working on had reached a critical stage, and the office was busier than ever. But amid the chaos, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between Daniel and me. Every glance, every word, every subtle interaction seemed to carry more weight than before. It was a Thursday afternoon when I realized just how deep my feelings had grown. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing some documents, when I felt his presence before I heard his footsteps. Daniel had stopped by to check on our progress. As usual, he was calm and composed, but there was something different in the air. He leaned over to point something out on my screen, and for a brief moment, our hands brushed. It was a simple touch, but it sent a jolt through me. I quickly withdrew my hand, trying to ignore the heat rising in my cheeks. But Daniel didn't seem to notice. He continued to speak about the project, but I couldn't focus on the task at hand. My mind was consumed with the moment, how close we had been, how his presence seemed to linger in the air long after he had walked away. The story revolves around the subtle and unspoken feelings that develop between a woman and her boss in a professional setting. It's not just a tale of romance, but also a story of the inner conflict faced when personal emotions clash with professional responsibilities. The central theme of the story is the unacknowledged attraction between two individuals, the woman and her boss, but the complexities of workplace dynamics prevent them from acting on their feelings. It explores the dilemma of balancing personal emotions with professional integrity, showing how difficult it is to navigate feelings when power imbalances and professional boundaries come into play. Moreover, the story touches on the internal struggle of an individual who is aware of their feelings but is reluctant to express them because of the potential consequences it could have on their career and relationships in the workplace. This leads to self-reflection, questioning how to acknowledge and manage emotions without crossing the lines of professionalism. At its core, the story emphasizes two important aspects: trust and sincerity in relationships, but also the necessity of respecting boundaries. It showcases how, sometimes, the most responsible decision is to honor both your own feelings and the professional environment by not letting emotion